Gakushu said her name with a twist. He said it with a bite and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. He didn't know. It was a complete mystery to him. He thought about it on his way to class. Her name, YN. He couldn't fathom why it felt so weird to say it. Well, weird wouldn't really be the word he'd use to describe it. Fascinating would be more like it. He conjured images of her in his mind. She was younger than him, he thought, and so she reminded him of his little sister, Tsubaki Asano. He blamed that also on why his hand began to sting with her missing hand in his right after he let go. For now, all he needed to know was that people had seen them. Rumors would spread. Someone might even approach him about the subject, and he'd casually let it slip that yes, he was in fact dating YN, his next-door neighbor. Hey, what's wrong? You look like someone put a hole in your chest. Gakushu looked up to find Ren, once again, being annoyingly honest. I stayed up a little too late last night. Yeah, you look like it, Ren said, sitting in his seat behind Gakushu. And you? I'm sure you studied as well. Like a champ, but lights out at 10 p.m. Gakushu nodded, then turned back around. He didn't go to sleep until at least 11:35 the night before. He couldn't figure out why. He just kept thinking about today. No other reason, just today. Like he was excited. But that was a ridiculous accusation. Gakushu Asano never got excited. Never. But he couldn't deny the way his blood had pumped when he'd tried to relax his body. It was irritating. He needed to see a doctor or something. Ms. Heim walked in. She also taught the second-year A-class students, English class. Gakushu remembered having her last year. She was still around the same height, still had chestnut hair, although she cut it kind of short, and freckles, and her foreign accent was as obvious as ever. Her eyes sparkled when she saw him. Gakushu Asano was a favorite of Miss Heim's last year, as he was this year. He knew she had high expectations for him. Gakushu, though, had once tried to compare Miss Heim to his father, but couldn't make the connection. They only had one thing in common. They both wanted Gakushu to succeed, and Gakushu hoped it stayed that way. Miss Heim was a kind teacher. She listened, unlike most of the others. She was self-aware and knew she could get things wrong at times. He admired that about her. He knew people who boasted about themselves often were always on the more likely hand of being the direct opposite. There was just one thing he didn't like: her eyes, and the way they narrowed when someone made a joke about E-class. Gakushu, dazed, pulled out his English textbook and got ready for the day. Later, during lunch, he'd find YN. He still felt a little odd saying her first name and the fountain behind the school she was talking about. He was a little pumped because if he hadn't known there was a fountain, it was very unlikely any of the other students knew about it. That meant it might be quiet, and because of the past few weeks, he needed a little quiet. He supposed it was all right if YN was there, as long as she didn't annoy him too much. Miss Heim clapped her hands and grabbed the attention of Class 3A. Gakushu tuned in, leaving his old thoughts in the past, and began to take notes as she explained Greek mythology. A few classes later, lunch was upon him. Gakushu grabbed his bag and began making his way to the cafeteria with Teppei and the rest of the Big Five. He was halfway through the door when he remembered YN and the fountain behind the school. He sighed and stopped his friends. I have to go somewhere today. Where? Teppei asked, and Gakushu watched all of the student council members perk up. What should he tell them? If he said he was going to see another student, would their minds jump to him dating someone? If he said his girlfriend, it might get the word out there without really having to do anything. That, he thought, would be a smart move. The faster, the better, he thought. I'm going to eat lunch with my girlfriend from now on, he said, and thought it sounded just a little robotic. Gakushu then watched the faces of his friends turn into small smiles, smirks, and grins. I didn't know you were dating someone. Finally got caught on a hook, huh? Ren patted his back. That explains what Yamamoto was saying earlier. Koyama nodded, his hand resting on his chin. Gakushu decided to ask no questions about what exactly Yamamoto was saying, in part with his friends, with a final wave before trudging all the way back the way he came. He walked out a side exit and rounded the large school building, coming face to face with a small wooded area. A small, almost ghostly footprint in the dirt let him know he was in the right place. He followed the hollow footprint that looked like it was left there on purpose, and a few inches later came to a stop when he saw another, an almost direct copy of the footprint he saw at the beginning. He had a feeling he'd find more like them if he walked deeper. Gakushu had the urge to call out how he knew it when he caught sight of another footprint that was definitely made by the same of the ones before. He followed the footprints until they stopped. He was met with a small water-running fountain. It was white, and sitting on the wall of it with her legs pulled up and nose in a notebook, writing something down, was YNLN. Gakushu caught himself before he was staring. He knew how it'd look, and he couldn't have another one of those spacing out moments when looking at a girl, because last time he tried not to shudder at the memory and pushed it far, far away. He approached his quote-unquote girlfriend and set his things down where hers lay. She jumped and caught her heart in her chest. You scared me. She glared a little. Gakushu didn't say anything. You know, it's common decency to announce your presence before you approach someone. Gakushu smiled at her comment, finding it a little amusing. Okay, I'm sorry. Mayan looked content with that and finished whatever note she was writing down in her notebook, then set it to the side, grabbed her lunch, and turned to Gakushu. Hi. Hi, he replied, because what else was he supposed to do? So, what do we do? She asked. I beg your pardon? Do we talk or just ignore each other? I'm asking what you would prefer to do. Gakushu was not expecting that question, but luckily, last night, after he couldn't go to sleep, he'd walked out onto his balcony, where he faced Wyan's bedroom, and thought. This was a question he'd asked himself last night, and thus answered. I really don't care. What? Gakushu bit his tongue. He hated repeating himself. It just annoyed him. But he did. I said I don't care. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. Okay then. If you don't mind, I'm going to study. Gakushu nodded and turned away, looking toward the forest, listening to the chirp of the crickets in the background and the water running down the fountain. He ate, slowly, thinking about everything and nothing at all. Randomly, he whispered, This is nice. What? A faint and distant voice asked, and though Gakushu still hated repeating himself, said, This solace is nice.